Welcome to the Battery Testing Mentor podcast. My name is Johannes, and here I discuss all topics around battery testing and battery safety. Short, on the point, and with practical advice. Also visit www.batterytestingmentor.com and sign up there for the email update. With every episode, I send out an email that summarizes the episode and gives you an insight into is it worth listening to the episode, which is of course always the case, but sometimes you have more important things to do. I understand this. Also, if you have any feedback, any wishes, any recommendations, just hit reply on that email and you directly reach me. I come back here now after the summer into this podcast, and I have to admit, and I'm somehow a little bit embarrassed, that I didn't release any episodes during the last couple of months. I don't even know when the last episode really released. I think it was probably March, April, May, something like this. But nevertheless, I stop looking into the bad history and turn myself towards the bright future, where I plan to continue with the podcast and release now really like every 2 weeks a new episode. I was pretty busy during the summertime. My girlfriend and me, we moved, we found a new apartment. We're living now in Munich, so if you come by or if you are in Munich, also hit me up and let's meet, hang out for a beer in one of the beer gardens as long as the weather is still nice, and talk about batteries. And of course, I am really curious. It's not only what I say, but I'm really, really curious to hear feedback about the podcast. I'm also very grateful for some people who reached out to me during summertime and talked about the podcast. It is very nice to hear, to see that it's not just a podcast that goes into the air, but there are also people listening, and hopefully that also get some insights from this podcast. Also, I hope the audio is good today, because as I said, I moved into a new apartment. It's not so much furnished yet, so it might be a little bit echoey here. Therefore, I also use the headset to make the quality better. I hope it's good enough that we can release it. And if it's not perfect, then please excuse this. With the time when I have more furniture and also then a real setup here, then I hopefully also make the podcast better in terms of audio quality again. And another thing why I didn't release the podcast was that apart from looking for an apartment, which is pretty tough in a city where there are not so many apartments, is that I was pretty busy with work. I was working on some projects. Very interesting. These projects also brought new ideas into my head about episodes that I can work on. So I have definitely a list of a lot of topics to talk about, and I will work through this now through the next couple of months. Nevertheless, really the point is, I want to stress, if you have some topics that you're really interested in, reach out, let me know, and I will definitely take this into account. With that, I have brought a new topic. It's basically some pattern, some type of episode I did already a couple of times. I was again at a conference. That is maybe also a point why I don't have so much time, because these conferences take a lot of time, but they give a lot of insights. And especially the conference I talked today about was really insightful. It was the International Battery Safety Workshop, which is a conference quite small, I would say, but very insightful, because it's not only about companies promoting their business and their products, but it's very academic, very research oriented, and you really get some insights all focused about battery safety. That's another very interesting thing. It's not a huge conference where everyone is going there and talks about anything, but it's really focused purely on battery safety. And I went there, I listened to these speeches, it was very insightful, and I want to share some of the insights that I had during this conference. One very cool thing was, cool thing for me was solid state battery safety, because for solid state batteries, there's a lot of talk in the town basically, and a lot of things that these solid state batteries should be. It's not yet clear if this is really the case. And there are these people who say, oh my God, solid state will be the solution to all safety issues. With solid state, the fluid electrolyte, the burnable electrolyte is gone. You replace it by a solid material that basically then creates connection between cathode and anode. And by having the solid electrolyte, can nail a cell and it won't burn, and you can do whatever you like, and it will be always safe. And there are these videos, or there are these promotions that this is really the case. Nevertheless, these are always often news from some company that want to sell their solid state battery. And yeah, these probably some reason why they release these videos of these, or these news about these super safe batteries, but only about this kind of aspect when they say, okay, we can nail our cell and it still has 4 volt afterwards, and you can basically still use it even though there's a nail sticking through it. And there was one speech that kind of analyzed the behavior of solid state batteries based on literature. They also did some tests. Also, the real big problem is that you don't really have access to a lot of especially big solid state batteries. Nevertheless, they analyzed and they basically came to the conclusion that a lot of the safety reports about solid state batteries are deducted from this material. So basically, companies say, we remove the burnable electrolyte, we replace it by some solid thing that like evaporate, doesn't turn into a gaseous venting event, and therefore the cell should not be burning and the fire risk is gone. Yeah, this is basically an theoretical approach, but really published data about these batteries is not really available. And this study, they basically tried to get all the studies that were about solid state batteries and then did some tests with some samples they got. And they come to the conclusion that it's not all so rosy, the picture. There are aspects where solid state batteries really get much better in terms of safety behavior, especially when you have high temperatures. Also because the electrolyte cannot boil. But there are other areas where you might have more risks, or where it's not so clear if safety will improve. This is especially for cold temperatures. One reason is that the material is then more stiff, more brittle basically, and the connection between these surfaces from anode to the solid electrolyte and then electrolyte to the cathode is, the colder it gets, the more difficult this connection will be. Whereas when it's warmer, it's more softer material and it easily goes together. Whereas when it's cold, it might be more stiff, and then you might have an unevenness, no proper connection between these material surfaces, and this could lead then to hot spots at single points where you have then better conductivity, so all the current goes through these points with higher conductivity. Also, the mechanical aspect was mentioned as a topic really to investigate, because you have no fluid, you have basically material layers, and there it is important that you make sure there is no rubbing of these materials, no mechanical impact, and that the connection is really always there. And then most of the other points are kind of, okay, could be better. There are some tests that show it might be better on small cell. The big question is, how does it perform on big cells then? So still a lot to investigate. Of course, they didn't come out and say, oh, so solid state is all bad or solid state is all good, but need to look into it. But it doesn't look like it will be all good at once. Another point was very interesting was aged cells, because I also did some speeches there already for about this topic, safety behavior of aged cells. And there are basically two effects that are play a role there. One is lithium plating, and basically this lithium plating reduces the onset temperature of the thermal runaway, reduces the onset temperature when the self-heating really starts and starts to run away. And by this, it makes the safety behavior worse. The battery can start earlier to go into thermal runaway. And this is really purely connected to this lithium plating. And lithium plating especially happens when you discharge at low temperatures. And there is the other effect or main effect that influences the safety behavior of aged cells, and that was the loss of capacity. So basically the degradation of the battery, that in the beginning you can charge full and really get the full ampere hours out of the cell, and then over time it reduces and is then one point only at 80% or even lower. And this is a positive thing in terms of safety, because the energy that is involved in the cells and that is involved in a thermal runaway then is lower even if you charge the battery fully up. And therefore the whole event has less energy to release. And basically you have these two effects. On the one hand, the lithium plating, on the other hand, the degradation of the capacity. And the key point is really to understand how the battery aged, how was it used at low temperatures, for example, and then see how much is the risk of lithium plating. Another speech was about kind of also abuse tests, safety tests, and that was also very interesting. I thought that basically how fast the reaction happens has a huge effect on how violent it is. And the interesting thing was really that the slower the reaction develops, the more violent it will become. So basically, if you have a cell and that goes from normal to explosion or venting within seconds, it is less violent than if you have it over minutes building up. It makes totally sense, because the longer time you give the cell to develop this thermal runaway, the more like it heats up temperature-wise, the more energy it stores in terms of heating up the material. And then when it really goes to this violent reaction, more energy can be released. There were a lot of other interesting speeches, like about sodium ion batteries, also the safety of sodium ion that also can go into thermal runaway. It's not like sodium is all great again. Seems with all the batteries, it will never be, or not yet, all great, which also makes sense because you have, I think I talked about it once in the podcast, that you have the energy storage and the energy conversion at one place, and that is inherently risky. Yeah, there were some other things, also more application, like the impact of cabling, for example, on batteries and so on. Nevertheless, the time is already running out again. I hope some insights really gave you some inspiration about the future battery technology. And as I said, please reach out to me. Also, please like this podcast, of course, and YouTube video and so on. It helps me to get more followers and make this reach of this podcast bigger, so I can also spend more time on it. Nevertheless, I am happy if I shared some knowledge with you and made you maybe think a little bit. I wish you a good week and hope to see you, hear you next week for the next. It was in 2 weeks. I don't want too much pressure on myself. So in 2 weeks for the next episode. Until then, all the best to you. Bye.